Summer 2020. The Yangtze is in flood, and the largest power station on Earth opens its gates. From the face of the dam, white jets blast outward, thousands of tons of water every second, hammering the river below into a wall of spray. The roar carries for kilometers. This is a machine built to fight a river. To understand the dam, you first have to understand the river. The Yangtze runs some 6,300 kilometers from the Tibetan Plateau to the East China Sea. Its basin holds hundreds of millions of people and much of China's farmland and industry. For thousands of years, this river gave life, and every few decades, it took it back. In 1931, monsoon rains and snowmelt drove the Yangtze over its banks in one of the deadliest floods in recorded history. Whole provinces vanished underwater. In 1954, it happened again. Tens of thousands dead, millions displaced, cities cut off for weeks. The river's floods were not disasters. The idea of stopping it is more than a century old. In 1919, Sun Yat-sen sketched a plan for China's development that included damming the Yangtze Gorges for power and for navigation. At the time, it was pure imagination. China had no heavy industry capable of building anything close. In 1944, with the war still raging, an American dam engineer named John Savage surveyed the Gorges. He had helped design some of the great dams of the western United States. He walked the riverbanks, measured the rock, and concluded a dam here was possible. Then, Civil War came, and the plans went into a drawer. The dream survived the revolution. Mao Zedong swam the Yangtze and wrote of walls of stone arising in the gorges to hold back the clouds and rain. But engineers argued for decades. How much silt would it trap? How many people would lose their homes? What if it failed? The project was proposed, shelved, and revived again and again. The decision finally came in 1992. The National People's Congress approved the Three Gorges project, but nearly a third of the delegates abstained or voted against it. In a body known for near unanimity, that was extraordinary. The dam was going ahead. The site chosen was Sandouping near Yichang in Hubei, just below the last of the Three Gorges. The reason was under the water, a broad shelf of hard granite, strong enough to carry a structure of almost unimaginable weight. Upstream, the valley narrowed perfectly to hold a reservoir. The geology decided the location. Ground was broken in December 1994. What followed was one of the largest construction efforts ever mounted. At its peak, tens of thousands of workers labored on the site around the clock. Whole hillsides were cut away. Access roads, bridges, cement plants, and worker towns appeared where there had been farmland. The first task was not the dam. It was moving the river. Engineers carved a diversion channel through the right bank, a new bed for the Yangtze, wide and deep enough to carry the full flood. Only once the water had somewhere else to go could they build on the ground where it used to run. In November 1997, they closed the main channel. Truck after truck backed to the edge and tipped boulders into the current. For hours, the river swallowed them. Then the gap narrowed, the water accelerated to a white rage, and finally, the rock held. The Yangtze turned aside into the channel built for it. Next came a dam before the dam. A vast cofferdam of rock and clay was thrown across the drained riverbed and pumped dry, creating a walled construction pit in the middle of the Yangtze. Inside it, men worked on bare rock, where deep water had flowed weeks before. The foundation had to be perfect. Crews stripped away every meter of weathered rock until they reached sound granite, then drilled deep grout curtains to seal the cracks beneath. A gravity dam holds a reservoir with sheer weight, but only if the ground beneath refuses to move or leak. Then the concrete began. More than 27 million cubic meters of it, placed layer upon layer, year after year. Curing concrete generates its own heat, and heat cracks great walls. So the mix was chilled with ice and cold water, and pipes were cast inside the blocks to carry coolant through the growing dam, like veins. Slowly, the shape emerged. A concrete gravity dam roughly 2,300 meters from bank to bank, and about 180 meters tall from foundation to crest. Not the highest dam in the world, but immense in bulk, a barrier wider than 20 city blocks, standing across one of the great rivers of Asia. In June 2003, the gates closed and the reservoir began to fill. The rapids that had wrecked boats for centuries went quiet under rising water. Villages that had stood for generations disappeared beneath the surface. Within days, the character of the gorges changed forever. The human cost was counted in the millions. Roughly 1.3 million people were resettled. Whole towns dismantled, rebuilt higher on the slopes, or emptied entirely. Some received new apartments and new jobs. Others lost farmland, livelihoods, and the graves of their families. It remains one of the largest planned relocations in history. History was moved too. The Yangtze temple was taken apart and rebuilt on higher ground. The Shibaozhi pagoda was ringed with a protective wall and became an island. And at Baiheliang, ancient carved river inscriptions, 1,000 years of low water records, were sealed beneath a purpose-built underwater museum. What filled the valley is not really a lake. It is a reservoir some 600 kilometers long, reaching upstream toward Chongqing, holding on the order of 39 cubic kilometers of water at full level. Its weight presses on the crust beneath it. Its surface has redrawn the map of central China. The engineering principle underneath it all is simple. Hold water high, let it fall, and take the energy on the way down. At Three Gorges, the reservoir stands roughly 100 meters above the river downstream. That difference in height, the head, is the entire source of the dam's power. Water enters through intakes on the reservoir face and drops down steel-lined penstocks wider than a two-lane road. At the bottom, it strikes a Francis turbine, a curved steel runner roughly 10 meters across, weighing hundreds of tons. The water spins it, the shaft spins a generator, and the river becomes current. There are 32 of these main units, each rated at 700 megawatts, housed in powerhouses on both banks and underground in the mountainside. The last of them came online in 2012. Total installed capacity, 22,500 megawatts, the largest power station on Earth by that measure. In a good year, the dam produces around 100 billion kilowatt-hours of electricity. In 2020, it set a world record of about 111.8 billion. That power leaves the gorge on high-voltage lines running east and south, toward Shanghai, toward the Pearl River Delta, toward the factories of a country in a hurry. But the dam was never only about electricity. Its first purpose was flood control. Around 22 cubic kilometers of the reservoir is kept empty through the flood season, a deliberate void, waiting. When the peak arrives, operators absorb it upstream and release it slowly, shaving the crest off the wave before it reaches the cities below. The third purpose was navigation. Drowning the rapids turned a treacherous river into a deep waterway, and freight to Chongqing rose enormously. To get ships past the wall, engineers built a 5-step staircase of locks, twin flights, each chamber some 280 meters long, lifting vessels more than 100 meters in stages. Climbing that staircase takes hours, so in 2016 a second route opened, a shiplift, the largest of its kind ever built. A vessel of up to 3,000 tons floats into a steel tank. The tank is sealed, and the whole thing, ship, water and all, is hoisted vertically more than 100 meters in about 40 minutes. Every great dam eventually meets the same enemy, silt. The Yangtze carries an immense load of sediment, and still water drops it. Some settles in the reservoir. Much of what once traveled to the sea now never arrives, starving downstream floodplains, lakes, and the delta of the sediment that built them. There were other consequences. Reservoir banks, newly saturated and repeatedly wetted and drained, began to slip, and landslides became a recurring hazard for shoreline towns. Scientists have tracked small earthquakes linked to the changing water load, and migratory fish, including the endangered Chinese sturgeon, found the river cut in two. And yet, the arithmetic is hard to dismiss. The dam's output replaces tens of millions of tons of coal a year that would otherwise be burned. Its official cost was on the order of 250 billion yuan. So much water was gathered so high that scientists calculated it very slightly slows the Earth's spin by a few hundredths of a microsecond a day. Stand on the crest at dawn and the scale stops being a number. Below, the river runs on toward the sea, released a turbine at a time. Above, 600 kilometers of held water lies still in a valley that used to roar. The Three Gorges Dam is not a solution to the Yangtze. It is a bargain with it, one that will have to be honored and maintained for as long as the river runs.